The sound of the judge's gavel cracked through the courtroom, and for a second I thought my heart might stop. Denise sat at the table across from me, mascara streaked, staring like I was the traitor. Her son Tyler slouched beside her in a cheap suit, arms folded, as if this hearing was just some hassle before he got his $370,000. He honestly believed the court was about to force me to pay his debt. "Mr. Ellison," the judge said, peering over his glasses at me, "you are under no legal obligation to cover this young man's stupidity." Tyler's head snapped up. Denise grabbed his arm. The room went so quiet I could hear the air conditioning hum. That was the moment I knew I'd done the right thing, when I walked out of my own house and disappeared. My name is Mark Ellison. I'm 56, born and raised in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and until a few weeks before that gavel fell, I honestly believed I'd die in the same tan ranch house on Maplewood Drive with the same woman I'd been married to for 20 years. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. It started on a Tuesday night, one of those gray March evenings when winter won't quite let go. I came home from the plant, dog-tired, smelling like machine oil and corn dust, just wanting a shower and a plate of leftovers. Instead, I got Denise in the folder. She was waiting at the kitchen table, still in her dental office scrubs. The TV was off. A manila folder sat in front of her, thick enough to make me uneasy. She slammed it down the second I walked in. The sound hit me like a hammer. "Sit," she said. I set my lunch pail down, hung my Carhartt on the chair, and sat across from her. The kitchen light felt too bright. The old fridge hummed louder than usual. She flipped the folder open and spun it around. Pages of numbers, bank logos, red past due stamps. "What is this?" I asked. "You're paying my son's debt," she said. $370,000. The bank wants it paid. I told Tyler you'd have money moving by tomorrow. No delays." She said it like she was ordering carryout. For a second, all I heard was the ticking of the clock over the stove and rain against the window. My brain tried to wrap around that number. 370. "Denise, are you out of your mind?" I finally managed. "That's more than our house is worth." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. You've got your 401k away. We can refinance the house. You can pick up overtime. The point is, Tyler needs a clean slate. He's trying to build a future." Tyler, 27, healthy, never kept a job longer than 6 months. The same kid who once laughed and said, "I'm not breaking my back in some factory like you, Mark. I'm not stupid." This is from his crypto thing I asked, scanning statements that looked like a foreign language wrapped around a nightmare. "He had some bad luck," she snapped. "It happens. The bank doesn't care. They just want the money, and you're the man of this house, so you're going to handle it." The word "handle" tasted sour. "Why is my name on some of these?" I asked, spotting my own signature, where I knew I'd never sign. She didn't blink. "You authorized me. I've been doing the paperwork for years. It's the same thing." My stomach dropped. I kept turning pages until my hands started to shake. "You opened a line of credit in my name," I said quietly. She sighed. "Mark, I did what I had to do for my son. Our son." "He's not our son," I said before I could stop myself. "He's your son, and he's a grown man." Her eyes went flat. "You're being very small right now." I looked around our little kitchen, the oak table from Menards, the faded GE fridge with a Hy-Vee magnet, the window where we used to stand on Sunday mornings and watch the neighbor kids ride their bikes. For a second, I saw us on our honeymoon up by Lake Superior, Denise laughing in the wind with her hands shoved in my coat pockets. Back then, she'd clung to me like I was her whole world. Now she was looking at me like I was a walking checkbook. "I'm not selling my future so Tyler can crawl out of a hole he dug himself," I said. $370,000. That's everything I've got. That's my retirement. That's the roof over our heads." She leaned forward, perfume too sweet in the hot kitchen air. "Your simple little life disgusts me sometimes, Mark. You think small. That's why you've been in the same job your whole life. Tyler is meant for bigger things. He just hit a rough patch. You, on the other hand, are replaceable. Replaceable. Like a broken part off one of the machines I fixed." I swallowed. "So that's what I am to you." "You're my husband," she said. "And that means when my son needs help, you provide. End of discussion. You'll talk to the bank tomorrow. Transfer whatever you have. We'll figure out the rest. But Tyler gets that money started by tomorrow. I already told him." My hands were still on the folder, but I didn't see the numbers anymore. I saw 20 years of holidays and Sunday dinners suddenly rearranged into a ledger. Debits and credits. A woman who decided my job was to fund her boy's dreams. No, I said. It came out soft, but it surprised even me. She blinked. What did you say? I said no. I pushed the folder back toward her. I'll look at it. I'll talk to the bank. But I'm not promising you a thing tonight. The air went sharp. If you walk away from this, she said, don't you dare call yourself my husband. I stood up. My knees ached. My heart did too. Maybe I don't, then I said, and walked down the hall. In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the little dish on my dresser where my dad's wedding band sat with my spare change. He'd worn that ring through 38 years of marriage and a lifetime of factory work. He used to tell me, you protect your family, but you don't let them destroy you. I picked up that ring and rolled the cool metal between my fingers until my breathing slowed. The next day on my lunch break, I drove to the Lynn County Credit Union and asked to speak to someone in private. By the time I walked out, I knew two things: we didn't have enough to save Tyler without sinking myself, and some of those accounts with my name on them smelled a whole lot like fraud. That night, after a stop at the VFW and a talk with my buddy Frank over weak coffee, I went home, waited until Denise was asleep, and sat at the kitchen table with my old laptop. I pulled up an airline website and booked a one-way ticket out of Cedar Rapids. The confirmation pinged on my cheap phone. I wasn't running away. I was drawing a line in the sand. And soon enough, Denise was going to find herself standing on the wrong side of it. I left the house before sunrise, 2 days after Denise dropped that folder on the table. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get in March when the snow's melted, but the cold still hangs in the air. My breath fogged in front of me as I stepped onto the porch. I had one duffel bag, my wallet, my dad's wedding band tucked safely in my pocket, and a phone with barely a charge left. The house behind me looked different in the early light, like a place I used to live, not one I belonged to anymore. I didn't leave a note. What could I possibly say? I'm done being your bank. Good luck with the mess you created. None of it felt right. Silence felt cleaner. I drove to the Lynn County Credit Union and sat in the parking lot until they opened. I kept watching my reflection in the windshield. 56 years old, tired eyes, lines in my face I didn't remember earning. I'd spent my whole adult life fixing machines, solving problems one part at a time. But this was something else. Inside the credit union lobby smelled like old carpet and hand sanitizer. A young woman named Melissa took me to an office and listened while I told her I needed to freeze every account with my name on it, even the ones I hadn't opened myself. She frowned. You're sure you didn't authorize these credit lines? I'm sure, I said. Well, then you're going to need to speak with an attorney. I nodded. Already have one. I'd called my dad's old lawyer, a steady man named Arthur Keene. 70 years old, sharp mind, slower voice. The kind of guy who read every sentence twice before he said a word. Arthur's office was 2 blocks away, so I walked there. The cold wind off the river stung my face, but it kept me awake, kept my thoughts sharp. He greeted me with a firm handshake. Mark, good to see you, though I wish the circumstances were better. We sat in a small conference room lined with bookshelves. He got straight to business. Show me what you've got. I handed him the photocopies of the credit statements in the folder Denise had thrown at me. He flipped through them, slowly tapping a pencil against the desk. After a few minutes, he said, Mark, some of these accounts were opened in the past 6 months. I nodded. He pointed to a signature line. And this is not your signature. No, I said, it isn't. He leaned back. Your wife may have committed fraud, and if she transferred funds under your name, that's potentially a federal offense. My stomach clenched even though I'd suspected as much. What do I do? You do exactly what you're doing. You secure your assets. You document everything, and you get yourself out of the blast zone before this thing blows. He drafted the paperwork to freeze every joint account until the marriage situation was legally sorted. My money, the money I earned, was now locked where Denise couldn't reach it. Next, he said, you need physical distance. You staying in town will only escalate things. I booked a ticket, I said. Good, he closed the folder. Mark, this is going to be ugly. She won't react well. I know, and I did. I'd lived with her anger long enough to predict its shape. Before I left, Arthur handed me a sealed envelope. Mail this to yourself. It documents the freeze, the suspected fraud, and your intent to seek legal separation. A paper trail protects you. I slipped it into my coat. That envelope would be the last thing Denise ever expected. By late afternoon, I was standing in the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. The terminal smelled like burnt coffee and pretzels. People moved in every direction, dragging suitcases, talking loudly, living lives far away from mine. My flight to Duluth wasn't for another hour, so I found a seat near a window. Snowflakes drifted sideways across the runway. For the first time in days, I felt light. Not happy exactly, just unshackled. That feeling lasted about 10 minutes. My phone buzzed. Denise, 12 missed calls. Then a text. Where are you? We need that money started today. Don't you dare run from this. I turned the phone over so I couldn't see the screen. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not yet. Maybe not ever. When the plane took off, I watched the lights of Cedar Rapids disappear beneath the clouds. I didn't know if I was flying toward freedom or just another mess, but at least it was my choice. Duluth hit me with a wall of cold the second I stepped outside. Not the polite Iowa cold, this was sharp-edged lake wind cold. The taxi driver, an older guy with a beard like frost, chuckled when I shivered. First time up north, he asked. Not since my honeymoon, I said. He glanced at me in the mirror. You look like a man who could use a drink or a fresh start. Maybe both, I said. I checked into a cheap lakeside motel with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered "Vac NCY." The room smelled faintly of old cigarettes and lemon cleaner. The heater clanked like it was dying, but it worked. I sat on the bed, kicked off my boots, and let the quiet settle. Through the thin wall, someone was watching a basketball game. On my pillow, a small card read, Stay, rest, begin again. For some reason, that hit me hard. Around 9, I walked to a diner across the street. The place was nearly empty, just a trucker nursing a plate of pie and a young waitress wiping down the counter. The radio played a call-in show about navigating divorce in your golden years. I laughed under my breath. Couldn't escape it even up here. The waitress poured me coffee. Long day. You could say that. Bad marriage, she asked too casually. Something like that. She nodded like she'd heard that story 1,000 times. You'll be all right. Folks start over all the time up here. After dinner, I returned to my room and finally powered my phone back on. 8 new voicemails, 15 texts. I opened one at random. Mark, you're acting childish. Tyler is panicking. I told him you'd start the transfer tonight. Call me. Another, if you don't fix this, I swear you'll regret it. Another, we had a life together. Don't throw it away over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That was rich. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out the envelope Arthur gave me, addressed it to my own house back in Cedar Rapids, and walked it down to the motel mailbox. The cold bit into my hands. Snow crackled under my boots. I dropped the envelope in and let the metal door swing shut. Inside that envelope was the truth, and when Denise opened it, her world was going to tilt. I walked back to my room with a strange calm settling in my chest. Not joy, not relief, just the quiet certainty that I'd crossed a threshold. Back inside, I lay on the bed and listened to the old heater kick on. I thought about the life I had built, the years I'd given, the mistakes I'd let slide. I thought about Lake Superior the last time I'd been near it 20 years ago, when Denise held my arm like she'd never let go. That woman was gone. And the one who replaced her wasn't taking my future down with her. My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from my sister in Des Moines. Mark, I don't know what's going on, but Denise posted something on Facebook about you running off with a younger woman. People are talking. Call me, okay? I shook my head. Denise always escalated when she felt cornered. But tomorrow she'd be more than cornered. She'd be confronted with the truth she'd never expected. She couldn't control me anymore. And I wasn't coming home. Mark, you need to get back here. There's screaming on your porch, real screaming. That was the voice of my neighbor, old Mrs. Rhonda Hayes, blasting through my voicemail first thing the next morning. Her voice shook like she was witnessing a crime scene. I replayed the message twice just to make sure I heard it right. I was still sitting on the edge of the motel bed in Duluth boots, half-laced, the smell of old cigarette smoke lingering in the air. Outside, Lake Superior wind rattled the window like someone knocking to come in. More messages came in one after another. Babe, Mark, they're pounding on your door now. That boy Tyler, he's yelling like a wild animal. Babe, your wife looks like she's about to faint from screeching. I'm staying inside until the police come. I didn't smile. Not really. But something inside me settled. The kind of quiet satisfaction you get when a truth you've known for years finally proves itself. I put on my coat and walked to the motel's tiny breakfast area. I poured myself bad coffee and listened to every voicemail, each one louder, more frantic. By the fourth message, Denise herself came through, breathing hard voice, shaking between fury and panic. Mark, what is this? What did you do? You think you can just freeze everything? You think you can just walk away from us? Get back here right now. In the background, Tyler's voice cracked like a teenager losing a video game. Tell him to send the money. He has to send the money. Then something slammed against my front door, hard. The next voicemail was even worse. Mark, open the door. We know you're in there. What is this letter? Answer me. I looked out the motel window at the gray lake and took a slow sip of coffee. They had finally opened the envelope. I imagined them standing on my porch, Denise clutching papers, Tyler pacing like some overgrown toddler who'd had his toy taken away. Their screaming wasn't about heartbreak. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about losing control. I sat down at a table by the window and finally opened my texts. There were dozens. You can't do this. This is illegal. You'll pay for this. Answer me, or I'll come find you. Then another voicemail, this one not from Denise, not from Rhonda, but from the person I least expected at 8:15 in the morning. Frank from the VFW. His gravelly voice came on. Hey, buddy. Don't know what's happening, but your wife's tearing up Facebook right now. Said you ran off to Vegas with some 20-year-old. I told the guys it sounded like bull. Just call if you need anything. I set the phone down and rubbed my temples. This was exactly who Denise was. If she couldn't control the truth, she'd weaponize a lie. I finished my coffee and headed back to the room. The heater clanked on again, doing its best to warm the space. I sat on the bed and let the chaos play out in my head. I didn't feel good about what Denise and Tyler were going through, but I didn't feel guilty either. Some storms people bring on themselves. The phone rang again. This time I answered. Denise didn't even wait for my hello. Where are you? She screamed. In Minnesota, I said calmly. Minnesota? What the hell are you doing in Minnesota? Taking a break, I said, thinking. Her voice cracked. Thinking, Mark, this is serious. You froze every account. Tyler can't access the bank. They said you filed for a legal hold. What is this? It's paperwork, I said. You'll be fine. Don't you dare patronize me. This is fraud. You can't just... Actually, I said. Arthur explained that I can. Silence, heavy, dangerous. Then she hissed, you are going to ruin Tyler's life. He already ruined his own, I said. I'm not sacrificing my retirement because he wanted to play investor. You're unbelievable, she spat. You think you're some kind of saint. You think you're good. You're nothing without me. Nothing. I let a moment pass. Funny, I said, I'm feeling better than I have in years. She sucked in a breath like she'd been slapped. You come home right now. We can fix this. We can talk like adults. Just come home, Mark. For the first time in a long time, I heard something fragile in her voice. Fear. Real fear. But I also knew what came after fear with Denise: rage. Manipulation. Trying to pull me back into the gravity of her expectations. No, I said, not coming home. You coward, she said. You ungrateful old coward. I mailed you everything you need, I said. Talk to Arthur. He'll explain it. You bastard, she shouted. Then the call cut out. I turned off my phone and set it aside. For a moment, the world felt impossibly still. An hour later, the motel manager tapped on my door. Sir, phone call at the front desk. Front desk calls usually mean trouble. I followed him. The corded phone sat on the counter. Mr. Ellison, yes, it's your attorney. I picked up. Arthur. Mark, he said, voice steady as always. Your wife is attempting to sell your home. I blinked. What an... She called the realtor on Maplewood. Said she needed to put it on the market immediately, cash sale preferred. But the title company flagged the freeze and called me. She's frantic. I put a hand on the counter to steady myself. She's trying to sell my house while I'm gone. Correct, Arthur said. But legally she can't. The home is in your name alone. She doesn't fully understand that yet. I let out a slow breath. Of course she didn't understand. She'd spent so many years assuming everything of mine was hers that legal reality never crossed her mind. Arthur continued, prepare yourself. She's going to escalate. She always escalates when she feels cornered. But remember, you're protected. I thanked him, hung up, and leaned on the counter. The motel manager raised an eyebrow. Bad news. Not really, I said, just confirming things I already suspected. When I got back to my room, I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The heater kicked again, clicking like an old engine trying to stay alive. Lake wind howled against the window. For the first time since leaving Cedar Rapids, I felt something unexpected. Grief. Not for Denise, but for the years I stayed silent working overtime, fixing what broke, carrying burdens that weren't mine. I grieved for the version of me that let someone else convince him he was replaceable. I sat up, pulled out my dad's wedding ring, and rolled it in my palm, feeling the grooves worn by decades of his life. He wouldn't have let anyone treat him like this. Neither would the man I wanted to become. At noon, my phone buzzed again, this time a text from Rhonda next door. They're leaving, towed Tyler's car. Police made them get off your porch. I'll keep an eye out. Hope you're safe, Mark. I typed a simple reply, thank you, Rhonda, truly. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and realized something. The screaming had stopped. And this time they weren't the only ones finally letting go. I flew back to Iowa 3 days later, not because Denise demanded it, but because Arthur said the hearing was scheduled and it would be in my best interest to appear. Duluth had been kind to me, cold, honest, quiet, but you can only hide from a storm so long before you step out and face whatever's left standing in its path. The bus from the Cedar Rapids airport dropped me near the courthouse. A cold wind cut between the buildings. March in Iowa always feels like winter arguing with spring, neither ready to surrender. I pulled my jacket tighter and walked up the stone steps, each footfall echoing like a countdown. Inside the courthouse smelled like waxed floors and old paper. People moved in every direction, lawyers clutching files, couples whispering fiercely, officers guiding folks who didn't want to be there. Ordinary lives unraveling and rearranging under fluorescent lights. Arthur was waiting outside the courtroom, leaning on a wooden bench like he had all the time in the world. You ready? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be. He gave a nod. Remember, stay calm. The facts are enough. Calm, easier said than done. When we walked into the courtroom, Denise was already seated at the petitioner's table. She was dressed in a charcoal gray skirt suit, makeup heavier than usual, the kind you wear when you're trying to hide that you've been crying. Tyler sat beside her wearing a cheap suit jacket that didn't fit. His knee bounced a mile a minute. The moment Denise saw me, her jaw tightened. Tyler sneered. Nice of you to show up, old man. Arthur put a hand on my arm before I could respond. Let the court speak for you, he whispered. We took our seats. The judge, a tall, thin man with silver hair and glasses halfway down his nose, entered and called the room to order. Case number 24 FC 1187 Ellison versus Ellison. Hearing my own name spoken like that made my stomach twist. Denise stood immediately. Your Honor, my husband abandoned our family without warning. He emptied our accounts, stole funds that were meant to help my son, and disappeared across state lines. Stole funds. Me, the man who had worked 40 years without missing a mortgage payment. The judge raised a hand. Mrs. Ellison, you will have your chance to speak. Please sit. She sank down, lips pressed tight. Arthur rose. Your Honor, we have prepared documentation demonstrating that my client did not abandon his family, but instead removed himself from a financially and emotionally abusive situation. A murmur passed through the room. Denise scoffed loudly. Arthur continued, placing a stack of documents on the bench. Included here are credit accounts opened without Mr. Ellison's consent, forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, and attempts to liquidate jointly held assets. All performed by Mrs. Ellison. Denise jumped up again. That is a lie. The judge glared. Sit down. She sat trembling with rage. Arthur opened the folder. First, Your Honor, the matter of the home on Maplewood Drive. I felt Denise's eyes on me then, cold, calculating. Arthur went on. In 2019, Mr. Ellison refinanced the home solely under his name. We have the title deed and mortgage statements confirming this. Mrs. Ellison has no ownership rights and therefore had no legal authority to attempt to sell the property last week. Denise's mouth fell open. What? That's impossible. The house is ours. The judge adjusted his glasses. The paperwork is clear, Mrs. Ellison. Tyler whispered harshly. Mom, what did you do? Arthur wasn't done. Second, Your Honor, we submit evidence that Mrs. Ellison attempted to open 3 lines of credit in Mr. Ellison's name. The signatures do not match his, and the bank flagged them as suspicious. The judge flipped through the pages slowly. Each turn of paper felt like a nail being hammered into the coffin of their lies. Third Arthur continued, "We have documentation that Mrs. Ellison attempted to transfer funds to her son, Mr. Tyler Andrews, without Mr. Ellison's authorization." The judge's face darkened. "Mrs. Ellison, this is extremely serious." Denise looked around desperately as though someone else might step in and save her. "My son needed help," she said, finally, voice cracking. "I did what any mother would do." Arthur cleared his throat. "Your Honor, with all due respect, stealing from one's spouse is not an act of motherhood." A few people in the courtroom snickered before the judge silenced them with a glare. Then something unexpected happened. The judge turned his attention to Tyler. "Mr. Andrews, do you have any comment on the alleged fraudulent transfers?" Tyler straightened in his chair with a smirk. "Look, man, crypto is volatile. I had a plan. I just needed liquidity." Arthur leaned toward the judge. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe Mr. Andrews' so-called crypto investments involve a larger scam that targeted elderly investors. Mr. Ellison discovered concerning communications forwarded to his attorney." Denise jerked toward Tyler. "What is he talking about?" Tyler's face drained of color. "Mom, it's just a thing I was involved in. Okay, everybody exaggerates." The judge slammed his gavel once. "Enough." The room froze. "This court is not here to litigate cryptocurrency crimes," he said, "but the evidence of financial misconduct by both of you is troubling." Denise sank back like the air had been punched out of her. Arthur stepped forward. "Your Honor, my client seeks legal separation, exclusive rights to the home, and the immediate release of all funds back into his individual accounts pending final dissolution." The judge nodded slowly. "Given the documentation, I find these requests reasonable." Denise gasped. "You can't do this, Mark. Please, this is our life." She turned toward me, tears streaking her mascara. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look angry. She looked afraid. But I remembered what Arthur said. I remembered the folder slamming on the kitchen table, the words replaceable, the forged signatures, the screaming on my porch. And I remembered every time I'd stayed silent because loving her used to feel easier than standing up for myself. "Mrs. Ellison," the judge said firmly, "you must vacate the Maplewood property within 48 hours. Any further attempts to access Mr. Ellison's accounts will result in immediate legal action. And as for your son, his debt is his responsibility alone." Tyler shot to his feet. "You can't do that. You don't understand how crypto works." "Sit down," the judge ordered. Tyler sat. The gavel came down one last time, echoing through the chamber. "Court adjourned." I exhaled. My breath shook a little. Denise turned to me, voice trembling. "Mark, please, we can talk. We can fix this." I looked her in the eyes, not with anger, not with triumph, but with clarity. "No," I said softly, "we can't." I stood, buttoned my coat, and walked out of the courtroom. The sun outside was bright and cold, glinting off the courthouse steps. I took a deep breath of Iowa air, crisp as a fresh start, and dialed my sister. "It's done," I said. She didn't ask for details, she just said, "Good. It's about time you got your life back, Mark." And for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I had. The day after the courthouse hearing, I drove north again, back toward Duluth, back toward quiet air and water that didn't ask anything from me. Iowa faded behind me in the rearview miles of farmland, rolling out like a chapter I'd finally closed. The farther I drove, the lighter my chest felt. Not happy exactly, just unburdened. Like someone had loosened a strap around my ribs I didn't even know was there. By the time I crossed into Minnesota, Denise's voice, the courtroom echoes, Tyler's shouting, all of it felt smaller, like noise drifting into its own distance. Duluth welcomed me with a steel blue sky and a wind sharp enough to wake a dead man. I checked into a small apartment building up on a hill, the kind with old wooden stairs, and a landlord who cared more about fixing heaters than painting hallways. My place was on the second floor facing the lake. The windows were drafty, but I didn't mind. The view made up for it. My first morning there, I woke to the sound of Lake Superior waves crashing against the rocks below. Deep, steady, ancient. A reminder that the world was bigger and kinder than the mess I had left behind. I made a pot of weak grocery store coffee and stood at the window, with my mug watching steam rise from the lake like the world breathing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel like someone's disappointment or someone's wallet. I just felt like myself. Later that afternoon, I walked down the street to the VFW post in Duluth. Smaller than the one back home older building, but the same smell: coffee, old wood, and stories that wouldn't die. A handful of veterans played cribbage in the corner. A bartender in a faded navy hoodie nodded at me. "You knew?" he asked. "Guess you could say that." He poured me a cup of coffee without asking. "People come here for quiet conversation or loud regret. Either's welcome." I chuckled. "I'm more of a quiet guy." "Then you'll fit right in." I sat at the bar with my coffee, letting the warmth seep into my hands. A man in his 60s with a gray mustache glanced over. "You from around here?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just started over." He nodded like he'd heard that before, maybe dozens of times. "Starting over's hard," he said, "but staying where you're not wanted, that'll kill a man." His words hit deeper than he probably intended. We talked a while, nothing heavy, just life fishing the weather. But it felt good, real. No edge, no walking on eggshells. Just conversation with no hidden strings attached. When I walked home that evening, the temperature had dropped and the sky was dark. Streetlights flickered on, turning the snowbanks gold. I felt steady, like I had a place to plant my feet again. Back in my apartment, I checked my phone for the first time in hours. A text notification blinked. "Denise, you didn't have to humiliate me. I loved you." I stared at the message, not with anger, but with a strange sadness. Not for her, but for the years I'd spent twisting myself into shapes trying to be enough. Trying to earn appreciation that never came. I typed back slowly. "I hope you find peace. I already have." I set the phone on the nightstand. I doubted she'd reply, and it didn't matter if she did. The next morning, I walked to a small diner overlooking the water. Same kind of place I'd eaten at during my first night here. Chrome stools, clattering plates, the radio humming softly. A waitress with silver hair and kind eyes brought me waffles and coffee. "Looks like a fresh start kind of meal," she said. "Feels like it," I told her. After breakfast, I took a long walk along the shore. The cold bit at my cheeks, but the sunlight was bright, reflecting off the water, like a road leading somewhere I hadn't considered yet. When I got back to the apartment, my phone buzzed again, this time with an email from Arthur. Subject: final ruling, filed message. "Everything is resolved. You are officially protected. House accounts, property, all secured. Rest easy. Arthur." I sat down at my table, letting those words settle. Rest easy. When was the last time someone had said that to me? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my dad's wedding ring. That small circle of gold had lived through decades of his life, and now it lived through this chapter of mine. I turned it over in my fingers and placed it on the table beside my coffee mug. I didn't wear it now. Not because I'd given up on love, but because I'd finally understood something. Love should never require you to erase yourself. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the lake, I caught myself smiling at nothing. Just the simple comfort of being alive, free, unclaimed. My phone buzzed again, this time a picture message. From Tyler. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. There he was, standing in what looked like a messy apartment, wearing a loud Hawaiian shirt, holding a cheap beer face, flushed like he'd been ranting for hours. The message under it read, "I told her she was wrong about you, man." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. It wasn't kind, it wasn't unkind, it was just absurd. Tyler, even in defeat, still managing to be an idiot. I put the phone down and shook my head. Life was funny sometimes. That evening, I sat by the window and watched ice drift across the lake. The sky turned that soft purple blue that only cold places know. Lights flickered on in houses along the hill. I felt something warm settle in my chest. Not relief, not triumph. Just peace. I made a small dinner, turned in early, and let the sound of the waves carry me toward sleep. Before I did, I picked up my phone and recorded a message, not for Denise, not for Tyler, not for Arthur. For anyone who might hear my story someday. I spoke softly, honestly, from the man I had become. At 56 years old, I thought my life was set in stone. Work-home routines. But sometimes life breaks the stone so you can see what's underneath. I learned something these past weeks, not about revenge, but about reclaiming what was mine. My time, my money, my dignity. If you're listening to this and you feel small or replaceable or worn down, I hope my story reminds you that it's never too late to take your life back. And if this resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you shared it or followed along. We're all just trying to find a little peace in this world. Thanks for listening. I ended the recording, set the phone down, and turned off the light. Tomorrow would be quiet, and for the first time in decades, the quiet would feel like home.